G'day everyone, back here again. Matt and I, we've been catching up a lot lately, but not so much in the last 2 weeks, mate. Missed you. You've got a bit of news, which has kept us from having a chat about this.
Yeah, yeah, busy times at home, that's for sure.
Yeah, new
Welcome
new
the
new arrival.
welcome the new one to the world. Yeah, kept us away from our chats. Speaking of bringing things new to the world, I think I wouldn't say long overdue, but a bit overdue in talking about Artemis.
Yeah, hey, look, it happened a couple of weeks ago, but look, I think it's still pretty cool. I think I was riveted by this. I was like just glued to the TV, and then there's all these like third-party apps and websites that popped up that were doing this telemetry and real-time telemetry, and like the telemetry was crazy. It was like at the speed of light. Like it was actually giving you feedback saying delayed by the speed of light and showing you how much delay there was. And we're talking like, I'm going to say miles, which is about 400,000 kilometers away. And we're getting real-time telemetry that's reshaping like renders of Artemis. I was like, man, this is blowing my mind. It's wild. But yeah, we haven't been able to talk about it because you've welcomed your own new arrival. It's something you don't know, mate. Your bub's name is my oldest daughter's middle name. So it's
There you go.
there you go. There you go.
Right on. Yeah,
So
it's been a wild ride so far, obviously for myself and those astronauts, but funny to think about, man. It's like there's been there like growing up, you and I are from the shuttle era, right? And
yeah,
we got a chance to see some cool stuff. But there was a lull in that. So you think about our kids or folks that are even a little bit younger than us are reading about it in history books or what they know might be relegated to, say, Star Wars.
yeah.
And I say Star Wars because Star Trek, I guess the is the new Star Trek really Star Trek to Trekkies? I don't really know that, but it's like I didn't think about it until really it happened again. There it is, right there. People haven't talked about space travel or gotten to experience it because of that gap. You know, about like satellites and like low Earth orbits and things like that, but nothing like, oh, we're gonna go back to the moon. And for some people, maybe we were never there. Who knows? But
There has been this buzz around it, and I think it was a bit like when Drive to Survive came out on Netflix. Like it just brought this new generation of F1 fans, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I feel like the Artemis mission's kind of done the same. Like it's got a lot of people excited about space and the possibility. I was taken back to my childhood watching it, and I was just, but the difference was you're not waiting for the news to tell you. Like you could be dialed in at any given time and you could watch like the hull temperature, the G-forces, all the system health just updating real time. And it just blew me away. And that's, I suppose, why we're chatting is this idea of real-time telemetry. And when we think about what we do at Operator and the CX observability, that's what we're doing. And this is where it blew my mind is that 400,000 kilometers, 295,000 miles away, we're getting pretty much real-time telemetry, and yet our contact centers here on Earth are like 5 days behind getting reports and trying to figure out what went wrong 5 days ago and then sending it off to IT. And these problems are just not getting solved. And I was just like, what? How is this? How is it that we are, like I know that NASA's heavily funded compared to most contact centers, but I'm like, the technology's there. So this is
yeah,
kind of
that
why I
was going to
got
be
kind
my
of
point.
excited
Was
about
like,
it.
well, wait a second, we've got a whole lot deeper pockets than our contact centers world does, but it does bring to bear the question of why are they there and we still seem to be here, or we talk about more often than not when we talk to people in the industry, it's like the age old struggle or
Mhm.
IVRs are like we can all still relate to the same problems that have been around for effectively the better part of 20 years. So it's just
Yeah.
really funny.
It's that's the thing. We've been talking about that same stuff for 20 years. And now I think we shake ourselves out of that and realize that there is all this other data and telemetry that we can start actually looking at that's different to what it is, that what our common and current reality is. So what
Yeah.
people can actually see. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I
So
was
so
listening to something that was really interesting, is just to put it into perspective. Say, me personally, I believe that we went to the moon, right? I believe the
mhm,
US was there. Neil Armstrong was out there hanging out. Everybody that went there, that said they went there, where they did make it, right? But I was talking, or I wasn't talking to, I was listening to a hot take from guys that were in mission control back in the day and
yeah,
guys that were there now. And you talk about how do we do that without all of the tech and everything, the modern innovations that we have today. I think it's just
mm,
something that we can ultimately pay an homage. It's amazing in contact center or the CX space that we have been able to accomplish what we, albeit there are still those gremlins that are hanging around, but I think it is really important to acknowledge that we have made significant steps forward, but now we have something that can help us do that job even better. And I think that
yeah,
kind of that parallel between the guys that have been doing it, the challenges are the same, but potentially the ability to make decisions or bring it all together in a timely manner. And like the guy that's doing the maths back in the 70s when they're sending all those Apollo missions out, like that's got to, you got to be snappy with all the calculations. Now you got AI that's helping you, hell, calculators, right? But
mhm, yeah,
um,
exactly. Back then, like the calculator was like the size of like 4 rooms, like 4 huge rooms. It was the calculator. It was, yeah, wild.
the other
And
thing that was interesting that they said was in mission control, if you have an iPhone 16 right now, or you have a relatively new smartphone, there's more compute power in your iPhone than there was in the room of mission control, right?
oh,
Back in the 70s, right? When they were, it's like,
mate,
what?
I remember when I first started running contact centers, and we had the old PABX, and it was a room. It was a whole room, and there's like buses that you'd pull out of the wall, and buses would blow up, and you'd have to go and switch them out. And old school. My grandma was like the old switch at the switch and moving cables around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A PABX was just a sort of modernized version of that, automating that. Now it's, and then I remember when we went to a PBX the first time, we moved away from the PABX and moved to I can't remember what it was. Can't remember the brand, but basically it was the first PBX in Australia. And it was so new that they hadn't even translated it from Japanese. We had to get a Japanese translator to help us actually work out how to install it. So that was pretty wild. And same
Cutting
thing.
edge,
Now we've
man.
moved to yeah, now we've moved to CCAS and it's all cloud. And funny you said that you're talking about how the mission control back then. I was having a chat with Vern from Jabra recently, and we were talking about how back in the day of the PABX, you would see the endpoint, and there was vendors were charging for that endpoint, right, to be able to see that endpoint. And then when we moved to cloud and moved to CCAS, we actually lost that endpoint of being able to see the agent and the headset. And it's something that nobody kind of took, nobody threw their arms up about, because there was all these other things that you could get, all the benefits that you get with CCAS and the integrations and all the power you can have from it washed over some of the stuff you lost. And it's funny that now we're talking about how CX observability gives you back that endpoint. You can see everything from the headset right through to the network. And now as we move into the AI side of things and observing AI and whether it did what it was supposed to do. But we this thing that was completely not sexy is all of a sudden like quite intriguing again. So I find that now we're in that CCAS space. We've got all this technology now, and we're we still need that mission control. So I think it's pretty fascinating stuff.
I think the interesting point there, at least from my perspective, is that data didn't go away. It just became less
Mm.
of a priority for whatever reason, right? We were looking at a
Mm.
new shiny object or something like that. It's not a piece of the puzzle that's intelligent or that plays a major role. Newsflash, that's not true. But generally, I think it's either as you move to cloud or as you move to a hybrid environment and a lot of the kind of gig workforce, if you will, like kind of the hustle
Yeah.
and bustle, a lot of things are changing. Whereas back in the day, everybody was static for the most part, right?
Mm.
So you come to the contact center, you clock in, you punch in, you log in, and everybody's there in kind of a controlled environment. So
Mm.
you lost losing visibility, especially if you had a brick and mortar contact center, maybe wasn't that big of a deal. But
Mm.
as we've gone through this dispersion, it's become more and more important. But I think it more has to do with the prioritization of the
Yeah.
data versus losing it. I think it's there. You probably just lost track of it.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's Yeah, I think that's why the link for me between Artemis and CX Observer. For me, it was really clear, and it got me excited about having this chat with you and talking about all the things that we see and don't see. But if we think about some of that stuff now, what do you think some of the common blind spots are now? That in the past, that was something that we never even knew was a blind spot.
Yeah, honestly, as a whole, if you were to think about just the blind spot, which within the blind spot that observability or CX observability aims to resolve
Mm.
is namely the primary focus is namely around the contact center to your agent and then
Mm.
what was the resulting customer experience. But that the first responsibility of that operator, of that contact center owner, if you will, is to make sure that experience between whatever solution they've chose as
Mm.
CCAS agent, that leg of the journey is a good one, right? And they
Mm.
can control that because ultimately there are some people, some vendors that operate in specific ways that might allow them more control over that, let's call it maybe the last mile, but the context of the last mile varies depending upon what we're talking about. But let's just say the contact center, the
Mm.
CCAS solution to your agent is ultimately your responsibility as a CCAS operator, right? As
Mm.
I've chosen Connect, I've chosen Nice, I've chosen Five9, I've chosen whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, you're going to be responsible for that. So the blind spot is there. And within that, you've got all things like network. You have pieces of hardware in between. So are you using VDI? What is the blind spot there? The blind spot there is you might be under, over, incorrectly terminating a voice within that
Mm.
connection. You're out of spec of that particular vendor. You never know. Things that you don't think about. And then all the things that happen on the machine as a result of the solution that you've chosen, right? They're
Mm.
not just running contact center software, right? There's likely screen recording. What about knowledge
Mm.
base? What about like the CRM that now has to compete for resources, not just on the user's machine or the agent's machine, but throughout the network as well. So that segment, that demand and draw is the blind spot. And it's I think it's infinite, really, and it's dependent upon how you choose to run your contact center.
Yeah, I think most people run their contact center like it is the black box. It's like we used to have the shuttle. We'd wait for the news to tell us that something went wrong or went right or whatever. And I think that's why I thought this last Artemis mission was so cool, is that you could see it real time. And even NASA had this on YouTube. They had their telemetry system Arrow, which like pulled all the sensors right across everything. It was pretty amazing. I think the next step for me was like, how do we have interaction with that stuff? Could you imagine that we were able to take that system and all that real-time feed telemetry from NASA and then just ask questions and be like, you know, what would be too fast a re-entry speed? And to be able to get that answer right now, or what's the current heartbeat of this pilot at the moment, and be able to compare with what's that like on Earth, and be able to see that and ask these questions. Like, they're all the things that I was asking myself these questions, and I was like, oh man, imagine how cool it would be to be able to have that interaction, like we do with what we're doing with CX Copilot. But imagine being able to do that with Artemis. That'd be sweet.
It'd be wild. The parallel is super interesting to think about. I immediately think about the panic that somebody might bring themselves into if, say, like they chose to interact with the language model incorrectly, and let's say it hallucinated, and all of a sudden this person how to get a hold of NASA that they came up with this new insight. Like that would be, you'd have to figure out how to handle that. But interacting with it in real time is wild. The speed of which that capsule was coming on reentry was nuts. I didn't even really think about it. But then I like to think about like fighter jets and how fast those go versus commercial airlines.
It was actually
There's no
hard to fathom,
stepwise.
right?
It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, my
So
daughter
like,
was asking, like, how fast is that? I'm like, oh, I'm trying to like put distance, and I'd be like, oh, it'd be like traveling from like Australia to America in 3 minutes, kind of thing. It was just like,
yeah,
it is just
wild.
so fast. And then even the thought of like the parachutes and these things slowing down from parachutes. Like, how is
Yeah.
that thing not just ripping straight off at that speed? And the engineering and everything that took place, and they're the questions I would have liked to have asked.
Yeah.
How does the parachute not rip off on re-entry because at that speed? And that'd be so cool. So next time, NASA, when you're listening, because I know you are, just can you put some like Copilot, like our CX Copilot, we've got an operator, just put that on the Arrow system so we can all question the data and get real-time answers and insights. That'd be sweet.
What's cool about that though, so like you're talking about querying something in real time
Mm,
and the telemetry centered around it and all the data points. And I don't even want to take a stab at the amount of data that they gathered, not just from, the space travel itself, but within the capsule, plus what's going on with the astronauts and all things surrounding that. But if you think about all that data that they're bringing together, and just like the volume of that, and like they're doing something infinitely more cool than contact center, right? But
I don't know about that, man. I
I,
think contact centers are pretty cool.
they are cool, but yeah, we that I think that might be a longer conversation to figure out how we navigate that one. But the point that I'm or the parallel that I'm drawing here is the mountain of data, the mountain of telemetry that NASA faces from an
Hmm.
analysis both in post, but more importantly in real time, right? We're talking about life or death scenarios here.
Yeah.
Maybe life or death for a contact center, right? Life or death for a business. I think that's a loose parallel that you could draw. I don't ever want to equate someone's life to the life of a business, but you get the kind of correlation. But the other part to that is all of the vendors, all of the technology providers that go into making these experiences happen, right? Flight to space, circumnavigating the moon, coming back, everybody lands safely. Kind of the same story. How do I get a customer out of my contact center and back into my business, exiting happy, healthy, safe, all that kind of stuff? That's done
Mm.
by all different kinds of technology from all different kinds of vendors, right? So you've got companies like Lockheed and Boeing and Northrop Grumman and Airbus, just to name a few, right? That go into the engineering of Artemis. But the
Hmm.
telemetry that we're seeing, the telemetry that you saw in real time, was kind of a roll up from all of those disparate vendors. And the cool thing is, astronauts, mission control, etc., use that disparate data, bring it together in a way that they can consume and make decisions on in real time.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what the system is called, but they actually used AI to provide that insight to both mission control and the astronauts in Artemis.
Wow.
So really cool to see like how that's being used. But imagine being I look back and think of what was it, Apollo 13 or whatever, where that movie for Tom Hanks, and he was doing the math on the
Hmm.
window and stuff like that. And I was like, man, that would suck. And AI just made that a whole lot better for these guys.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I just thought that was a cool parallel. It was like mountain of data, multiple vendors doing their own thing, multiple vendors doing the parallels are there.
Yeah. 100% they're there. That's why this whole topic, I think, came together. There's so many parallels. We work in a really complex industry and as that sophistication continues to take place and grow, so does that complexity. And this is where we need the data. And even with AI, we're rushing to implement AI in the contact center space. And I think there's some really cool use cases for it. What when that goes wrong? Like, who's watching that? How do we make sure that it's doing the thing? And it's a whole new sense of telemetry and guardrails that we need to be able to put up in that space. And I think it's a really exciting time. I think this is, man, maybe when you said, oh, I spoke to someone, I was like, oh man, I hope you did actually speak to someone, and we can get them on and we'll have a chat with them. Hey, if you're an astronaut or you work at NASA or you're something like that and you want to talk to us, then come say good day. Hey, what is one piece of real-time telemetry you would want to have seen?
For Artemis?
Yeah, sure.
I would have liked to have seen, and I know that they collected this, but I would have liked to have seen the astronaut like health telemetry, stress levels, heart rate, and correlate, like not just during the launch, right? You're obviously going to get an adrenaline dump, but I think the really interesting part was they went around the dark side of the moon, right? Losing communications for the better part of an hour, maybe a little less, but there's what's happening leading up to that. And then how do they prepare for that time that they're going to be alone? And does that look like to them? Like, because I know I'd be stressed. I'd be hustling, bustling. But maybe it was calm and collected. But maybe they were calm and collected because they had access to all this data that the guys that went before them didn't.
That's true. Yeah, and because there was a couple of times where there was alarms that weren't right, they were inaccurate, going off for the wrong reasons. And it would have been interesting to see their stress levels when those things were going off and waiting for the confirmation from ground control to be like, yeah, just ignore that alarm. And the fact that ground control could even tell that the alarm was a false alarm was pretty cool. But yeah, I think, what about from a contact center perspective? What's one piece of real-time telemetry you'd want to see? Jeez. You can't say agent health data.
I can't say agent health data. No. I know there was a company that was hooking their agents up to,
I think like that was right. Monitor.
Yeah. But
creepy.
Although cool, somebody's done that already. I don't know if it's one piece of telemetry. I think it's more of I want to see more of a correlation between the software, like a soft phone element, like a soft phone logging, like an agent experience alongside network. I want to see that correlation better done, even better than we do it today. There's always room for improvement, but the soft phone element, or the software that is operating your agent's voice access that then rides the network, that's still a piece puzzle for a lot of people. And we bring the data forward as operators. Selfish plug here, but there's always a way to do it better. I can't think of anything that would be hyper unique, like something new that we don't do right now, but like a correlation. I think that's something that AI is really enabling the industry to do, is do that kind of stare and compare really better than we ever have. Just operate, but just again, holistically look at this versus that and tell me the differences. That helps you solve problems a heck of a lot faster and predict them, get in front of them before it becomes something systemic. Really tough question. Sorry if that's not really.
No, it's good.
I feel like that's not kind of a sidestep maybe, but
yeah. I want to see, because we used to talk about this in the contact center. Your contact center was either a buzz or a hum. And if it was humming, it was good, meant everything's working. But if it was a buzz, then you knew that something was not quite right, like everyone was scrambling for a reason. And I'd love to be able to see what that scrambles for, and in real time, whether you're using not just sentiment data, but like you said, that correlation, and being able to bring all of those bits together to raise the alert, say that we're heading off track from the hum. That would be cool. And I think the other one is just, I've talked a little bit about this, but about like how we can potentially predict agent burnout and correlation, and being able to see like certain behaviors or certain, I was talking about this with the 10 by 10 rule, like that if you, and one of our data scientists pulled up this figure that if someone has a bad MOS value, mean opinion score, then they're 50% more likely to quit in the next 3 months, like a consistent high, poor MOS value. And that's being affected by something. And I'd love to be able to see that sort of agent burnout prediction just a bit more real time and trying to help curb that. Because I think a lot of the time we just think it's people misbehaving. I'd love to see how it's like actually data driven and desktop driven and not DNA driven. So I want to see more of that real time. That'd be cool.
Your response was a heck of a lot more thoughtful than mine. But if I were to just ride that, I think sentiment is really interesting. And sentiment alone, I think people have come around to figure out that is not really what we thought it was going to be. Everybody thought that it was going to be like the end all be all. This is amazing. I'm going to use it in QA, and this is going to be a great kind of systematic way to go about handling these kind of customer impacting interactions. More often than not, when I talk to a customer, they're like, that's great that you handle or that you see sentiment data, but they don't really prioritize it the way that the industry thought that they were going to do it. I think sentiment data alongside it, I think, again, that kind of correlation,
Yeah.
sentiment alone is not the data point.
Yeah, agreed. Man, this has been super fun. It's been interesting. I reckon we could riff on this all day, but I'm sure people would be pretty tired of it. So to wrap up, I'm going to ask a question of anyone that's listening, and they might want to chime in, and that is that, like, when has there ever been a moment when real-time data has changed how you understood a problem in your contact center? I'd love to hear about that and what that did. So that's, if you're listening, let us know what you think about that, and then maybe we can talk about that next time.
I've got some good ones.
Okay. Tell me.
You want me to give one?
If you've got one.
Look, the really interesting one that I came across was we had a customer come to us, and this was the feedback that they had, right? They had implemented Operata, but let's just say we collected real-time telemetry. Historically, from a network perspective, you're not going to be able to tell how wide the blast radius was for a particular outage or for a particular network event, right? You just know that you lost connectivity, you know that there was a degradation, but there's actually trying to quantify that is really, really difficult to do. So what actually happened is the customer said to us and said, hey, the network team came to me and said, hey, do you have the ability to, in some way, tell me how many contact center agents this particular network outage or degradation impacted? And what happened is they were able to give a full readout to their providers and the executive team to say, this is how bad the problem is. This is how far outside the SLA it was. And there's obviously commercial, contractual elements that the customer, our customer, could go back and say, hey, we did all the things right. We did it exactly as you said, Mr. and Mrs. CEO. Here's the proof in the pudding. And now you can go and advocate for the business to either improve that segment of the network and or take some restitution. So it was really interesting, and the guy felt like a rock star. It was kind of a fun story.
Just drop the mic and walk out of the room at that point. Yeah, we should do something on that. Blast radius. I like the sound of that. That's a good title. Blast radius. All right, man.
There you go.
Good chat. Good example. That's why you're here, because you see the real stuff, man. It's awesome. It's good.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mate, you go enjoy some family time. I'm going to get out of here. We'll say goodbye to everyone.
Until next time.
And as always, hooroo.